Hello there, and welcome to another side quest episode of Talk This, It's Dangerous to Podcast Alone. I'm your introduction host, Madelyn, and once again, we'll be doing a head-to-head side quest multiplayer battle this week on the podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about strategy guides and walkthroughs. Are they ever acceptable to use while you're gaming? Do they add to your experience? Detract from it? Do they ruin it? Are they necessary? Well, you'll hear two sides of the debate coming up in 3, 2, 1. I love strategy guides as literature. I realize that's super dorky to say, but especially when they used to make the print ones, which, like, rest in peace. When's the last time they really made those? I loved geeking out over the trivia and the Easter eggs that they would include in there. They're super fun to read after you finish games, and they're also fun to read for games that you'll never play, because I feel like sometimes when you get a really good strategy guide, you get a real voice from the author, and it sort of feels like you're hearing like another person's perspective on the game, or a friend sort of talking about the game. I love TV recaps for the same reason. But in the same way as I wouldn't read those TV recaps before I watch that episode of the show, I don't think players should use walkthroughs before they finish a game. I'm going to throw it back to a game that we talked about on the podcast maybe a month or two ago now, Grim Fandango. So Grim Fandango is a really kind of like, it's an interesting game. It's a game that I would like to play. But when I was getting stuck, and I started having to consult the walkthrough online, like the strategy guides, and get tips of how to move through it, it really ruined my experience of the game. I felt cheated. I felt like, I felt kind of dirty. And for me, like, yes, like, I fully understand that, like, yeah, strategy guides can help you get through parts of games that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get through, but it's sort of a poisoned way of doing it. I can't use a strategy guide without feeling like, ugh, like, this sucks, like, I'm cheating. It really feels really, really bad. And that takes away from my experience of the game. You don't get the same sort of emotional payoff when you solve a puzzle, or you defeat a boss, or whatever, when you're only doing it because somebody, like, taught you how to do it. It's so satisfying when you figure out stuff on your own. And while I don't think that walkthroughs are inherently evil, like, I certainly enjoy reading them afterwards and using them as sort of like, oh, like a New Game Plus kind of bonus deal. I hate having to use them during the game because it just takes away from the flow of it, and it takes away from the real feeling of accomplishment that you'll have. Like, think about it. If you're playing a game and you get stuck and you have to pause the flow of it and go like Googling around online, it doesn't feel as good as when you like are able to solve it on your own. I don't think that they should cease to make walkthroughs, because I really enjoy reading them and I like reading them, but I don't think that gamers should consult them during play. I think that if you can't figure something out, that maybe it's a good time for you to take a break and step away from the game for a while and come back and look at it with fresh eyes. And walkthroughs sort of take away that experience of perspective, and they kill the difficulty settings of the game.
Brutal fatality.
Video games can get hard. Sometimes puzzles are confusing, sometimes you end up going in circles, sometimes a boss seems to have no weak points whatsoever. That's part of what makes them fun, right? That's part of why it's a game. But when you die or fail over and over, no matter what you try, the game stops becoming a rewarding experience and turns into something you just want to turn off. That's the moment when I think you should turn to a walkthrough. Some people think that walkthroughs are cheating, and I definitely think you should try on your own first. But sometimes there are moments in an otherwise great game that you can't get through. That doesn't mean you should sacrifice the rest of the game. A walkthrough can get you through those difficult moments and move the momentum forward again. It's more valuable to turn for help in one moment in order to get through the rest of the game than to stop altogether. I also think it's fine to use a walkthrough to make sure you don't miss anything. All games have awesome hidden secrets that are easy to miss. Using a walkthrough to check your progress before moving on can bring full enjoyment out of the game. That's what walkthroughs are great for, making sure you maximize your own enjoyment of the game. If your enjoyment comes out of tackling difficult challenges only on your own power, that's fine. But if your enjoyment comes out of making it through it, even with help, that's totally fine too. We all have different levels of skill and different ways of playing, and each way is valid. There have been plenty of times, for instance, in Phoenix Wright games, where I just could not figure out the logic that they wanted me to get. Games like that can sometimes baby you through it, but sometimes they also ask for really specific things that just won't click in your mind. And after dying a few times, it gets pretty annoying. So I'll look at a walkthrough. To their credit, it usually does make sense after I realize it. Usually. But without the help of a walkthrough, I would probably just put those games down in the middle and start something else. And that's just a waste. I mostly really like those games. I want to see their conclusions. So when I really need help, I feel no shame in looking for it. Of course, I personally recommend spoiler-free walkthroughs, although some studies have shown that spoilers actually enhance appreciation of stories, even detective or mystery stories where it seems like it's based on the surprise. But basically my point is, do whatever floats your boat. If you want to use a walkthrough, use a walkthrough. If you don't want to use a walkthrough, don't use a walkthrough. But basically, just don't shame others for using walkthroughs either. I mean, that's what they need. That's what helps them get through the game. That's what enhances their enjoyment. And they're totally okay doing that. They totally have the right. So just deal with it, I guess.
Vicious fatality.
Just to be perfectly clear, I'm not saying that people don't have the right to use walkthroughs if they want. Of course you can use a walkthrough. I'm not gonna, reach through your earphones right now and stop you from Googling, what do I do at this point in Grim Fandango where I don't know what to do? But I will say that these points in games where gamers are sort of forced to turn through walkthroughs, it should be a point of learning for the game designers. Right? Figuring out the difficulty level of your game, I imagine, is a huge challenge, because you want it to be difficult for experienced gamers, but you also want to let new gamers in on what's going on, and you don't want to make any one moment, game-breakingly difficult. But we don't really have that anymore, right? If there's a moment where that is game-breakingly difficult, that maybe playtesters should have figured out, hey, this is kind of too hard, well, now we have online walkthroughs. Right? There's never a moment of this game is impossible, because we can always turn to the internet. And that sort of gives these designers a little too much slack, right? We should know, they should know when their game hits a point that, this should have been fixed. This is too hard. Gamers are not getting this. And so you're sort of giving them a free pass by looking at a walkthrough. I also think these walkthroughs reward a very solitary kind of gaming culture. There was a time where if you were stuck on something in an arcade game, or if you were stuck on something in, a local co-op adventure game, that you'd get your friends who are around or in the neighborhood or whatever, and you'd be like, hey, I'm stuck on this part of the game. Do you want to give it a try? I sort of even remember doing that with Kingdom Hearts sometimes. So not only do walkthroughs sort of, for me, mess up game experience, but they also encourage you to look to the internet instead of your real friends.
Savage fatality.
Well, first off, poison's a little bit of an extreme word, wouldn't you say? I feel like even at their worst, it's a little much to call walkthroughs poison to the experience. Just going a little too far for my tastes. Plus, in terms of the flow, I'll say the flow's already gone if you're stuck. If you get stuck on the same place for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, that's there's no flow there. It's already blocked. So a walkthrough is like calling a plumber, for instance. It's a hassle, sure, it adds to the frustration of the thing, but at the end of it, at least nothing's clogged up anymore, everything's working. And of course, playtesting is really important, and I think that a game that is really, really poorly balanced is still gonna get really bad reviews and really bad reception, even if they're using the online to try to combat it. But if there's just one thing, sometimes playtesters aren't going to catch that. And sometimes it's just bad for a couple of people. Maybe the majority of players find it easy or the right level of challenging. But even if there's one player that has too much difficulty with it, walkthroughs can help that one player get through to the rest of the game. Developers can't account for every single person that plays their game. That's not a great excuse, but, you know, there are different fixes than just being like, oh, the playtester should have caught it. But that's a whole other issue. I do wonder what Madelyn would say about forum posts with specific questions. That's real people, quote unquote. And hey, some of us, quote unquote, have real friends online. And, I mean, you know, you bond with strangers. That's the social thing. So walkthroughs used correctly are an invaluable resource. Hey guys, thanks for listening. I think we actually hit on something this week that we disagree a little bit more on than last time. But I hope you enjoyed. Let us know your opinions about walkthroughs. You know, we always want to hear your opinion on these debates as well. Make sure you follow us on all of our social media. It's all at Talk This Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can find all the info about everything you want to know in all of our episodes at talkthispodcast.com, which is our website. Keep an eye on our YouTube channel, Talk This Sisters. I swear I'll get something up there. It's coming. I'm sorry. I go to school, you know. But keep an eye on it, because it'll start cropping up with some stuff pretty soon. And as always, you know, thanks so much for listening. And we really hope you have a wonderful day.